Welcome. My name is Catherine Friend. I'm the author of six romantic adventure novels for Bold Strokes, and tonight I'm your moderator. And we're going to have three, hopefully four, Bold Strokes authors read. The theme is scenes where characters do what they love. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce one at a time, and then that author will say a few sentences about their novel, and then they will read for 5 to 6 minutes, and then we'll move on. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A spot. So we'll be monitoring that if you have questions. And I think because we're short a reader, there will be time for questions at the end. So we encourage you to ask questions because these people are the experts on their books. And those of us who are not reading will probably shut off our video and audio so you can just have focus on the reader. Our first one is Julie Cannon. Julie's published 24 novels and many short stories with Bold Strokes Books. Rescue Me and Wishing on a Dream were finalists for the Lambda Literary Award, Best Lesbian Romance. And I Remember and Fire in the Sky, which she co-wrote with Radcliffe, have won the Best Lesbian Romance from the Golden Crown Literary Society Awards. So, Julie, take it away.
Thank you. And Catherine, good to see you again.
Yeah, it's been many years.
Yeah, it has been. Thank you, everyone. I am going to be reading from Wildfire. This is the second book that I wrote with Radcliffe. The first one is Fire in the Sky. So this is the second book, and it's introducing some of the secondary characters in this first book are the main characters in the second book. And the setting is the Red Sky Ranch in Wickenburg, Arizona, which is northwest of Phoenix, maybe an hour and a half or so. So it's high desert, and it's set in the Red Sky Ranch. And the two characters in the book are Olivia Martinez. She's at the ranch for several months helping out the main characters in the other book. A couple of her best friends get the ranch up and running. And the other character that I'm going to read about is Riley Mitchell. And Riley is a firefighter. And like a firefighter, she does heroic things and she loves what she does, but she dreads it and hates it at the same time because of some of the things that she's experienced while she's been a firefighter. So I'm going to read a scene of Riley. It's about Riley and what she loves to do. So by the time Riley showered at the station house, changed into clean clothes, and had dinner, the night shift had come on duty and someone had mentioned a card game. She was still playing when the first alarm sounded a little after midnight, and the crew on call jumped up, grabbed their gear, and loaded into the truck. 15 minutes later, the second alarm sounded, and Riley joined the remaining crew to respond. The fire at the Cactus Motel, just south of Wickenburg proper, was on the cusp of becoming an inferno. Smoke billowed out of the windows on the third and fourth floors when Riley arrived on the ladder truck. She jumped off as the crew engaged the hydraulics to raise the ladders and get the hoses up to douse the fire from above. She scanned the building and the position of the crews already on site, but a flash of movement obscured the glow from a third-floor window for just a second. If she hadn't been staring up there, she would have missed it. "Hey," Riley said, grabbing a volunteer firefighter who was dragging a hose past her. "Where's the IC?" "Over at the command center." "Thanks." "What have you got inside?" Riley asked Richardson, the incident commander. The heat from the burning building radiated across the blacktop to the command center, and Richardson's face streamed with sweat. Riley already sensed the blacktop getting soft beneath her boots. "No one. The fire's too damn hot. We pulled our guys out." "Did they get everyone out?" "We think so," he said, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "You think so? How can you not be certain?" "It's a motel, Mitchell. They don't exactly take a head count. No one knows who's in or out half the time. Riley cursed inwardly and slid her rebreathing gear effortlessly into place. Where are you going? I'm going inside. I saw someone at the window. You can't go in there. The fire's too hot, he repeated. You could be chasing shadows, for fuck's sake. I saw someone. She jerked her arm away when he tried to grab her. No one is going to die while I'm on the line. Not again, she thought, and raced towards the motel entrance. I'm with you, a young woman called, and Riley glanced over her shoulder. Dee Crowley, a volunteer firefighter who always responded when her phone rang, ran beside her. No way. Wait outside. No way was she going to be responsible for the life of another firefighter. Crowley slapped down her full face mask. Let's go. We're wasting time. I'll be right behind you. All right. We'll be on channel 3, Riley snapped. With no time to waste arguing, Riley pushed through the dense smoke billowing out the door. The stairwell's on the left, Dee's voice crackled over the radio. The air was black as Riley climbed the stairs. Some idiot had propped open the doors to the stairwell, and smoke filled their only escape route. She kicked the door closed once Crowley entered. They didn't need more oxygen flowing upstairs to feed the fire. The smoke got thicker and the air hotter as they climbed from floor to floor. I saw them on this floor, Riley said, counting the landings as they climbed. To the left, somewhere in the middle. I'll go left. You take the other end of the hall. There may be others. And for fuck's sake, do not open a door if it's hot to the touch. If there's a fire on the other side, we'll have a backdraft and the whole hall will go. I got it, Crowley answered and hurried away. Thankfully, most of the doors already stood ajar. Whoever had been in them had already fled, and Riley checked the closed doors, opening each one after they were safe. Halfway between, she opened the doors for a quick search until she finally found an elderly woman unconscious on the floor, halfway between the closed window and the door. Riley quickly tugged off her gloves and felt for her pulse. It was weak and thready. Ripping off her mask, she placed it on the woman's face, providing her with a brief supply of fresh oxygen. Keeping her own breathing shallow to inhale as little smoke and noxious fumes as possible, she keyed her mic. Crowley, I found her. All clear on this end, Crowley responded. Riley secured the mask to the woman's face as she lifted her into a shoulder carry and lurched out into the hall. Following Crowley's headlamp through the murk, she worked her way down the stairwell as quickly as she could. Eyes streaming from the smoke and coughing from the fumes, she stumbled out into the parking lot and was immediately surrounded by EMTs and other firefighters. On her knees, she breathed into the mask the medic pressed into her face. After a few breaths, she turned and vomited, but her head felt much clearer. A few more hits from the oxygen, she got to her feet. Her chest hurt and her eyes continued to burn, but she'd been through worse, much worse. She tuned out the scene commander, chewing her out for going into the building. A chorus of other voices shouting at her, but she waved them all away and headed back to her crew. Richardson could write her up if he wanted. She'd done what she had to do. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. You have to know a lot about firefighting to write that kind of novel. Thank you. That was very good.
Thank you.
Our next reader is Elena Abbott. She's a trans woman living in Edmonton, Alberta. She writes all sorts of lesbian smut with trans and cis characters. And the sentence I'm going to read next is probably the most fun sentence I've read in a long time. Elena enjoys smacking them together and making kissy noises. So, Elena, take it away.
My book, my most recent book is Hunt of Her Own. It's a paranormal romance that was released in September. It's the third book in the Of Her Own series. It follows a witch, Rias, and a monster hunter named Ashley as they circle around and kind of fall for each other in a world that wants to keep them apart. Um, my reading tonight will follow Ashley as she goes on her hunt for a vampire along with a reluctant chaperone. When one is hunting vampires, it's best to be quiet, stealthy, and as unseen as it's possible for a human to be. So when I slipped into the abandoned house, I attempted to be all of these things. The man who walked in behind me was none of them. This is pointless, Marcus said, and I fought the urge to unload my hand crossbow into his chest. You've been hunting this thing for weeks. You really think it's in this shithole? His sentiments weren't entirely baseless. Most vampires, I'd been told, preferred much more posh surroundings, but sometimes beggars couldn't be choosers, and I'd run this bloodsucker down for weeks. I knew where she was, and I was going to show my parents that I could take care of a hunt by myself. Then the asshole behind me scuffed his boots on the ground. Right, not entirely by myself, I amended. We were in the woods outside Rocky Mountain House, a little more than an hour from Calgary. The house was decrepit with age and all but falling apart, the perfect place for a young vampire to lie low, especially one that couldn't yet stand to be in daylight. I've been on several hunts now, never by myself, and usually only as backup or support, as they called it. But I'd faced down a couple of other vampires now, and another werewolf. The latest had been a young woman who turned into a panther on me. My father had been knocked away by the beast, but I was quick to put a silver bullet in its eye. I might have thrown up afterward, but that didn't matter. I loved my job. My job was to hunt monsters, and that's what I was doing, despite how wrong it felt sometimes. This was my first chance to hunt without my parents present. I wanted it to go well, to be able to tell them that I took care of it mostly on my own. So I ignored Marcus's words and continued my silent recon of the dilapidated house. Half the thing had already collapsed in on itself, but most of the main room was intact. The stairs to the second level were ruined, but I wasn't worried about that. I wanted an entrance to the basement. It wasn't far, through another room, around the corner from the collapsed stairs, and through a broken doorway. It was like walking into a different world. From the ruined and broken wood walls of the old house to a solid foundation of mortar and rock like root cellars of old. I crept down the steps with Marcus hot on my heels until the stone floor spread out before us. I stopped a few steps in and waited for Marcus to plant his feet before I tried to peer through the darkness. No windows, no source of light at all. The basement was pitch black. This is pointless, Marcus said. Let's get out of here and get back on the trail. Shut up. I'm serious, Ash. We're wasting our time here. Don't call me Ash, I snapped. And I didn't ask you to come with me. No, your father did. I snorted. Yeah, that's what I want to hear right now. You know you're not ready to go on a hunt by yourself. Says you. Says everyone. Well, everyone can go fuck themselves. I threw an elbow back and connected with his gut. Now shut the fuck up and let's get moving. I want that vampire dead tonight. A throaty laugh rolled through the darkness. I believe you will be sadly disappointed, little blood sacks. I turned toward the voice, leveling the crossbow into the darkness. I felt Marcus at my back, muscles tense, sure his own weapon was ready to go. Turn on some lights and we can have a nice conversation, I bantered. That laugh echoed around the cellar once more. Yet is it not more humane to leave the cattle blinded before slaughtering them? I couldn't help but smile a little. Some monsters were not fans of some light banter before we killed them. Is this a philosophical question? I asked the darkness. Alas, if you'd not come to kill me, then perhaps we could have such a discussion. Why don't we have it right now? Certainly not, because you are attempting to aim crossbows at my heart. Her tone was dripping with sarcasm. I couldn't resist playing with her, but with each back and forth, I could feel Marcus's tension growing. And if we put them away, well, then surely I would come out of hiding. I waited for her to laugh again before I whispered to Marcus, Flare. What? Flare. I shut my eyes as I heard the distinct scratch and hiss of the road flare, and the red light shone even through my eyelids to illuminate the cellar. Well, so much for humane. The vampire's voice drifted on the air, and I turned, spying her standing at the top of the stairs. She was tall, lithe, pale in all the best ways, and had long hair that fell in unearthly waves of golden blonde. The air was filled with the pure sensuality that most vamps, in my brief experience, had. I could feel the pull toward her and cursed that it actually worked on me. Still, Marcus had to be getting hit harder than me. He sure didn't seem like it, though. He was quick to snap to the top of the steps, crossbow at the ready. He let the bolt fly, and she disappeared a second before it smashed into the stone wall. Reload, I yelled at him as I swiveled, trying to find her again. Gurk, gurk, was the reply. I leapt away quickly, rolling across the floor to come back up with the crossbow ready. The vampire had Marcus in the air, one hand wrapped around his throat. I leveled my crossbow at her. Put him down. Are you sure? Would you not rather I put him out of your misery? As tempting as it was to let her do it, I instead leapt sideways to get a better angle and fired the crossbow. It took the vampire in the leg, making her shriek and drop the idiot. She disappeared again, and I dropped the crossbow to swing the shotgun on my back around into my arms. The vampire appeared like a ghost from the darkness, and I fired point blank into her chest. She fell back, and I pumped another shell and put another round of buckshot into her leg. She screamed as I pumped it one more time. Any more shit you want to say? I quipped. She opened her mouth, her body already healing the damage. I fired before a word was spoken, taking out her entire head. A few seconds passed before the body stopped twitching.
Thank you, Elena. I'm learning so many things. I've been in the middle of a fire, and now I've been hunting vampires. If you ever need to know how to do it, Elena can tell you how to hunt vampires. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
All right. Our next reader is Bailey Bridgewater. Bailey is a nomadic grant writer who travels the world editing and helping the people with fundraising and planning more books than she could ever write. When she isn't stationed in a coffee shop with her laptop, she enjoys hiking, kayaking, exploring new cities, and imagining that one day she's suddenly going to wake up a far more socially elegant person than she is. I don't think you have anything to worry about.
Oh,
So,
trust me.
all right, Bailey, take it away.
All right. So I'm going to be reading from The Land of Death and Devil's Club, which is kind of a mystery novel. It's the sequel to Come Find Me in the Midnight Sun. So the setup for this is we have Louisa Leinbach, who's our point of view character. She's a detective and an FBI liaison in Alaska who specializes in missing persons. She's working with Dolly, a national park ranger, on a large-scale missing persons case. Dolly's grandchild, Rain, has gone missing, and Louisa and Dolly are searching for them. A tip has led them to Portlock, which is an abandoned mining and canning town on the coast. They're accompanied by Tails, who is Louisa's tailless dog, and they have reason to fear that a murder suspect might be lurking in the town, so they're trying to lay low as they search. We head toward the largest building, keep it concealed as well as possible. I draw my weapon. To my surprise, Dolly pulls a handgun out of her waistband, too. I have no doubt she's expertly trained to use it. Most rural Alaskans learn how to shoot a gun as soon as they're old enough to properly hold one. It's just basic safety here, given the wildlife. We keep tight to the wall of the large building, sliding around the corner until we reach its front door. I go ahead of Dolly, listening for anything inside. After a couple minutes, I nod briskly. The door's unlocked, and I push it open without showing my body, listening again. Then I lead the way inside, my gun a hard barrier between me and anything that happens to be lurking. There's light in the building. Part of the roof has collapsed, and sunlight streams in, dust particles dancing in the green-gold beams. Leaves, pine needles, and twigs form a mound on the floor. Desks are lined up against the walls, and where the light shines on them, they look ready for a new class of pupils to come sit. I run my left hand over the surface of one, feeling where the name Jack has been carved into the wood. This is exactly the kind of place that would draw people in. Alaskans love adventure, and if there's one thing we love more than an adventure, it's mystery. Something in the landscape is conducive to imagining violent deaths, and many people here find that promise. This place should be crawling with ghost hunters and game hunters alike, not to mention groups of teens on dares and random hikers. But there's no evidence of anyone at all now. There's not even a beer can. We walk along the shoreline north of town where a mist has gathered. The trees start back up in that direction, so we won't need to be so exposed. It's a warm evening, and Tails wades into the cold water as we go, soaking his leash. I let him splash around a little as we walk, searching. We discover several new fishing lures and hooks tangled in the trees near the water. Suddenly, the tugging at the end of the leash stops. Tails? I squint at the sun on the water and see the ridge of his back. His head's beneath the surface. Suddenly he pops up with water streaming off of his fur, and he looks at me. I put my hand up so he won't bark. He refuses to budge, even when I tug the leash, so I remove my footwear, roll my pants, and prepare to follow him out. Dolly's eyebrows are knit in confusion, but she just watches. I continue until the water's waist high, wondering how much I'm going to regret conducting the rest of this search in sopping wet clothes. I remove my button-up camp shirt and throw it to Dolly. I'm now just in my tank top. Tails is in the same spot, and he dips his head under again to show me what he's found. I reach down and feel it immediately. Plastic. There's a black mass under the surface. I pull up a garbage bag, tied tight at the top. I half drag, half float it back to shore where I tear it open. It's just trash, including the wrapper of a peanut butter granola bar, which is likely what caught his canine attention. I sigh and glare at Tails. Not exactly what we're looking for. I get my bag and pull out Rain's extra pillowcase, presenting it to Tails so he'll get back on to business. Dolly's at my side, speaking low. Should we throw the trash back? If someone sees it, they'll know someone was here. I nod and start to tie the bag back together. As I do, I note the trash more carefully. It's mostly soda cans with the occasional beer can thrown in. The contents all look pretty new, though. There's some candy wrappers and a few sopping newspapers. The dates are sadly illegible. A magazine offers the clue I'm looking for. Its silk spine still reads, June 2009. This trash was dumped recently. I present the magazine to Dolly, who notes the date and nods. Back in it goes. Tails still splashes along the shore, but he doesn't seem to be tracking Rain's scent. If he was, his head would be down and he'd be moving deliberately. Instead, it looks like he's just having a nice time cooling off. Eventually, we find ourselves in a secluded cove where the tree roots come right up to the rocks that line the water. The ground under my feet is marshy, and my boots sink into it enough that I indicate to Dolly it's time to turn around. We're far from town anyway. Tails is out in front of me, and I whistle low for him. The mud's halfway up his legs. He turns to look at me, then wags his nub. His single, sharp bark echoes before I can hold my hand up for silence. Tails, come, I growl. He wags his back end harder. I sigh deeply. If this is more trash, I swear. I signal for Dolly to hang tight while I investigate. She's not into the muddiest bit yet, and there's no point in her joining me and potentially getting stuck. As I get closer to my dog, he starts digging in the mud, flinging slimy chunks of muck onto my still damp shins. The mud stinks, so I keep my breath short and shallow. It smells more foul the closer I get to Tails, a stench like decomposition, mushrooms, oak moss, and something sour and unnameable. To my horror, Tails sticks his muzzle straight into the mud. When he pulls it back out, he's got a hand in his jaws, a human hand. I turn my head to the side, away from the unexpected sight of my dog holding a severed body part. As I regain my composure, I remind myself that maybe this discovery isn't so unexpected. This isn't the first time my dog has presented me with the hand of a deceased person. Clearly, we need to talk about his matchmaking endeavors. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Between the three of you, I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight. The image of the hand and the dog, but you got to love a dog whose name is Tails. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So our final reader is Jenna Jarvis. Jenna lives in Glasgow, Scotland with her partner, She can generally be found wearing dinosaur dungarees, taking her dog on lawn walks, and programming imaginary film festivals. Ride It Out is the second novel in her Girls from Nowhere contemporary romance series. She also writes epic fantasy with her Dragon Circle series. Though her stories are usually about queer people figuring themselves out, sometimes she thinks there should be a sea monster in there too. I agree. Before you start, Jen, I have to ask, what time is it?
It is 1 a.m. here, so this is fine. I'm much more of a night person and I'm not working in the morning, so
All right. Well,
nice
thank
feeling.
you for participating, and I'll let you start your reading.
Thank you. So I am going to read from my new novel, Write It Out, which is the one Sans Sea Monsters. So it's already out on ebook, and it works well both here for because it's new and the first time reading it, and also because it's a book that's really about my character Katie getting to do what she loves and to teach her love interest Mick about how to enjoy it too. So what she really enjoys doing is watching movies and making other people watch her favorites with her. And this really works well for her because she works as a movie theater programmer, but bad for the course of Write It Out, which is set entirely over the 2020 lockdowns. But basically, she ends up moving in with Mick, who is her one night stand, now tentatively a friend, and spends a lot of time forcing her film taste on her. So this is a sort of excerpt of a film night that kind of goes slightly awry as Katie comes up with strange suggestions of what they should be watching. Um, Katie had been informed several times in her life that she should have a keener sense of shame, something that seemed to surprise whoever was chastising her for it. She was awkward in speech and general demeanor and had never been good at hiding even the most embarrassing sides to herself, and had never been encouraged to see the point. She was clumsy, she dropped things. Sometimes she couldn't get a full sentence out, a big deal that wasn't exactly something new. She might as well be open about the cramps she was suffering from or the political structure she had no hope of actually seeing crumble in her lifetime. All her favorite works of art showcased creators who put all of themselves embarrassingly, sincerely, and sometimes dangerously into what they did. Fear of candidness and enthusiasm wasn't something she was prepared to adopt into her worldview. Still, she had a strong enough grip on societal norms not to be discussing her opinions on pornography preservation with most people. She had friends, colleagues really, who were literal experts in the topic and whom she could talk the ear off if she had an opinion she desperately needed to share. But Mick had ceased to be most people months ago, if she ever really had been. Thing is getting lost. This isn't doing it for you, not even a little. Katie hadn't noticed getting closer to Mick, but she was waking up and noticing how her own creeping over the couch had brought her close to being on top of her. Mick's lips were parted and remained so as she slowly started to smile. Maybe a little, she relented. Ropes are hot. Ropes, huh? Katie held in a laugh. Interesting. It was interesting, too, that she hadn't moved back yet, that Mick hadn't made her. But Mick's legs were still open, like her mouth, inviting her closer. And maybe the wine had gone to her head too fast again, or maybe Mick was right and they'd forgotten what normal behavior was. Or maybe Mick was just very pretty and they'd been watching people have exaggerated sex on screen for hours now. And would you be the one being tied up or doing the tying? I didn't say I wanted to try it, Mick said, blushing but not looking away. But I think being tied up, feeling someone press on you, that someone cared enough to put their will to hold you still, that's pretty hot. As Katie licked her lower lip, she knew this had gone too far. Whatever their history, whatever cinematic kinks they might appreciate together, they were supposed to be roommates. She didn't have much experience of that on a platonic, non-familial level, but she was pretty sure that even in the modern queer culture, sleeping with a roommate was not a smart idea if she wanted to keep them as a friend. And she couldn't lose Mick as a friend. She leaned back, kneeling in front of Mick's splayed legs in her corner of her old couch and trying to ignore the disappointment she imagined she saw in his dark eyes. There's no ropes in the next one, sorry. If Mick had something to recover from, it didn't take her long. Another one? We're doing an education. It's important. 4 in a row, though. Katie grinned as she slid off the couch to her feet. You're not busy. Leaning her head back dramatically on the couch like she felt trapped, Mick didn't look all that unhappy. But then, as she'd just admitted, she liked the idea of being held in place at someone's mercy, didn't she? I'll put on some tea, Katie said firmly, and walked out of the room, putting a canny hand to her chest the moment she was out of sight in a futile attempt to slow her heart rate. She'd thought Mick an ice queen once. Now she watched her blush practically underneath her as they talked about other people fucking. And Mick had let her pick the film. For some dumb reason, that meant something. When she put the kettle on, Katie almost yelled a question about what tea Mick felt like that night when she heard Mick speaking. Not in her normal voice. No, this was Mick attempting baby talk, or rather dog talk, as Katie had never heard her stoop to before. You're a very good boy. You've got a silly name for a dog, but that's not your fault, is it, buddy? There was a pause and a light thumping of a wagging tail against fabric, in which Katie suspected Mick was scratching Jean behind the ears just the way he liked, the way Mick had learned to do almost from day one. She thought of herself as awkward and standoffish, Katie knew, but she was always considerate. Though she worried about how to show it, she cared. She just worried because the caring had never gotten her anywhere before. I'm glad you came to live with me, and I'm sorry you got hurt. I'm sorry I let you get hurt. You didn't deserve that, did you, baby? Her voice got even quieter, and Katie had to move even further into the hall to hear her. I'm not such a great person, really. No one ever really manages the do no harm thing, and I really haven't. But I'm not going to let your mummy get hurt, okay? She's really cool, and I think she saved my life. So you guys are safe here as long as you need. Casey breathed in deeply, slowly, letting the air fill her lungs very deliberately, so that it almost felt like the reason her smile tugged at her lips. Maybe she didn't need Mick's answer to know what she wanted to drink. She had a pretty good idea of her now. And for whatever reason, Mick seemed to trust her choices.
Thank you very much. Another dog. I love that dog scene. Very tender. So that's all four of us, four of my readers. As moderator, we often worry about someone taking way too much time and going on and on and on. Well, not this group. Everyone stayed within their time, which is great. So we have time for a few questions. And what I'm going to do is call on you one at a time so we don't have that, stupid Zoom talking over each other sort of thing. So the first one is, what do you like best about the novel you just read from? Let's start with Julie.
Probably because partnering with Radcliffe made it even better than I could have imagined. We partnered on two of these books, and the way that we did it was I wrote the first draft, and then she came through and just made it so much better. And I think that was great. That was one of the great things about it. The other thing is it's set pretty close to home. I've always wanted to be a cowboy. There's a song, should have been a cowboy. That should have been me. But I ride a desk all day instead, so I dream about it. So I think that was the other good thing about it was it gave me a chance to kind of live my life vicariously at the Red Sky Ranch.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to be a mermaid. Maybe I should write a novel about a mermaid. That might
There you go.
fill that need for me. All right, thank you. So Elena, how about you? What do you like best about the novel you just read from?
Mostly it was a lot of fun for me to write. I stepped away a little from the werewolves of the first two books because the first two books mostly focused on werewolf and werewolf culture. So in this one had witches and hunters and other creatures that I could play with. It also helped close off a character named Natalie's story. She was one of the main characters in the first book, but she appears in all three. And she was the first trans character that I wrote in a book where she was the main character. And it felt really important to me to give her a complete story, which you kind of see over the three books. The trilogy really is her story while also following the other characters.
Oh, thank you. That's really satisfying when you have a trilogy to see the characters show up in the different books. And you read from the third one? Is that what you did
Yes.
tonight? Okay. Next, we have Bailey. What do you like best about the novel you just read from?
Definitely the settings. And so this book is set in Kenai Fjords National Park, in Seward, and also in Portlock, which is a real ghost town in Alaska. And
Mm.
so I actually got to travel to Alaska when I was writing these books and check out these really amazing places. And then, taking that experience of them firsthand and translating it into writing in a way that someone who's never been to Alaska is going to be able to really picture it, was really fun. So that for me was my favorite. And
Yeah,
of course the dog.
gotta love the dog. Okay, thank you. Jenna, what do you like best about the novel you just read from?
I feel like I'm repeating other people's points. I also like getting to write a dog into this one. It felt like I was getting to write about my own dog a bit, which was fun. Again, going back to Elena's point, I really liked, I have actually read Hunt of Her Own as well, and I really love the way you threaded together Natalie's story. I thought it was gorgeous. And yeah, I'm having fun with that with the writing. It's a sort of sidequel follow-on from Ride With Me. And again, I've enjoyed Mick as a character. I've got to come back to, who was a sister of a character in the first one, and it's been fun getting to break her down a bit more as a character. But also, I think with this one, I just really enjoyed actually getting to write about COVID in a weird way, because you don't really see it a lot in things still, so it still feels very sort of weirdly fresh, but also weirdly had to do a lot of research about it because it does feel like, oh, I actually don't remember in what order these things happened and stuff.
Mhm.
So that felt very strange, but good in a way, like quite cathartic or something.
Yeah, that seems like an interesting challenge to take that on. And you're right, not many writers have been doing that. Okay, so next question. I love to research. That's why I write. That's my excuse for writing. So, starting with Julie, you wrote about a firefighter. How do you get into that character, and what kind of research did you do to be able to accurately portray that?
I have a couple of friends who are firefighters and paramedics here in Phoenix, so it's always a great opportunity to pick their brain. Um, but you watch a lot of TV, you watch a lot of movies, you believe half of what you see, and you kind of question the other half. But as writers, what would we do without the internet? You can find out, and you can do brain surgery through by watching it on YouTube somewhere. So, what's it like to be a firefighter? What's it like to fight a fire? You can just ask all of those different kind of questions and you get a bunch of different answers. And but a lot of it is you kind of write what you know. Well, I don't know anything about this, but yet I have people that do, and they helped me with it and go, well, that's a little far-fetched, and well, okay, it's a small town, so I suppose they probably would do that sort of thing. So um but again, I don't know how people wrote before the internet when they actually had to go somewhere and do some things and do that kind of research.
Yeah. I had
Mhm.
to request a lot of weird books from the library. I mean, it was just a slow process, really slow process, but
Yep.
yeah. Elena, you probably couldn't do research on the internet about how to hunt vampires. So how does that work? Is there like already established norms in the genre, or do you just kind of make it up?
I pretty much just make it up. I do a lot of reading in paranormal romance, in urban fantasy, even fantasy novels that have more paranormal aspects. And I kind of, I take what I like from them and then I get rid of what I don't like. Like, I want to switch this. I'm going to change this to make this more interesting, or just make it something that I want to see instead of what other people have decided to use. And then I get to kind of put it together like a puzzle, and it's a lot of fun doing it that way because I can make leaps in assumption, I can make leaps in logic, and just like, you know what, I'm going to make this work and I will explain it later.
And you did it your way
Yep.
rather than following the whatever
in the world.
tradition might be. Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Bailey, you already said partly what you did for research and you actually went to Alaska, but just talk more about the whole experience of gathering what you needed for this novel.
Yeah, and I'm not a detective. You know, I've definitely never been a detective. I'm from an academic background. But I actually got interested in missing persons because I was a CASA. I was a an advocate for kids in the court system. And so I worked with the police a lot. Sometimes, you know, kids would go missing and there's, you know, processes and things like that to follow. So that kind of sparked my interest. And then you know, I started kind of writing what seemed logical, and that I have, you know, I have a lot of people who read it and say like, well, okay, this is how it would really go. For this book too, because I'm dealing with a search in a national park, I actually reached out to Kenai Fjords National Park, and their folks were really cool about answering my questions, especially because this book's set in the earlier 2000s. Like, you know, what technology would you have been using? How would you have gone about this search in this massive, you know, Alaska is just huge. And so they really offered a lot of insight into how that process works and how park rangers work with or don't work with both police and tribal nations too. So I'm a nerd and I just absolutely loved that process.
I'll bet those park officials really enjoyed actually being part of that process and being able to share what they knew.
Yeah, I think people do get a lot of because there's so much misunderstanding about how processes work when people go missing. So yeah, I think they did kind of like that.
Well, Jenna, I the two questions for you. One is what you know, the research that you did, but also Julie wants to know what your earrings, what's on your earrings.
I think I have, yeah, I've got Frankenfurter on one side,
Make it
and
fit on
I
one
think I've,
side.
and then I've got a little knife over here, I think, because I lost the other knife, so then I was just pairing him with things. I actually was wearing this out last night, and very young bartender was asking me who it was, and was like, "I think I've heard of that movie," and I was just like, wanted to die.
Yeah. Well, welcome to getting older. It's
Okay, that's like, are we not doing that anymore? Okay.
so,
Um,
so you did
Other
some research
question.
to find out about COVID, right?
Yeah, so there was a lot of research for that in terms of, especially I was honestly, I'm gonna do everything I can to not write myself into the corner that I did with this one, in which I was setting it in the States, and I do not live in the States, so I was mostly having to do a lot of very regional specific research about very specific Ohio town guidance for COVID at different times of the year, which sometimes reflected and sometimes really did not reflect what was going on where I thought it was, and also what I remembered it being as. So
Mhm.
that was fun. But the movies side of things I had a bit more fun with because I that's already again giant nerd about anyway, so I didn't really need a lot of encouragement towards that. That was fun. But it did get a lot of help actually because a friend of mine happened to know someone with a podcast about basically he interviews different movie programmers.
Hmm.
So I got to just sort of try and listen to that for a whole series of that, which was great. So that was just a really nice, I think it's called Marquee Mixtape, and he basically just sort of interviews all the programmers in the New York cinema scene, and they're all just sort of explaining how projectionists work and stuff like that. Most of this did not go in there, or I probably did badly, but it was fun to hear about from, again, people like to talk about what they do themselves, the specialists, so that's cool.
Yeah, okay. So we have, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left. And somebody from the audience asked a question. Do you start with setting, plot, or characters when you get an idea for a book and start writing? I'll ask it again. Do you start with setting, plot, or characters when you get an idea for a book and start writing? Julie, let's start with you.
Sometimes it's all three, and then one book, well, a couple books, it's like a phrase came into my head, like one book, Shut Up and Kiss Me. Okay, that's the title. Now, how do I write that? What do I put behind that? So sometimes it's all three. A lot of times it's maybe the characters first, and then it's built around the setting. But it just depends. It comes in all different ways.
Okay. Okay. Elena, how about you?
Most of the time, it's characters that come to me first. I've had the rare occasion where plot comes up, but usually I can't start writing until I have the characters firmly set in my mind, because for me the story really revolves around the characters. So if I'm still questioning who they are, or what they're going through, then the plot doesn't matter, because I need to know the characters better.
Mhm, mhm. Cool. Bailey, how about you?
I think
Uh,
yeah, it's a combination of all three for me, but for this book in particular, it was setting while I was in Alaska. I read an article about missing persons in Alaska, and so I kind of naturally went, okay, well, what would it be like to be the person who's out there covering, an area the size of my home state of Maryland, trying to look for a missing person? And so that really made me delve into like who would do that is their job. And so that's kind of how I developed the character. So setting was the spark, but I think character is the most important thing.
Jenna.
Yeah, I think again, all three, boring answer. I think mostly it's all three for me anyway, but with this one, I think it was actually character first, mostly because again, I had to, Mick was already an established character for me, so it was really about sort of going, okay, I would really like her to find happiness and for someone to kind of break down a lot of the baggage and the trauma I know she has in her head, and kind of then having to build up what kind of person that would be to meet that on that level, and then figuring out a plot, and then kind of realizing, oh, actually, you know what? If I was doing it a few years after Ride With Me, then it would have to be COVID, or I have to pretend it's not there. So then that kind of made the decision for me about what kind of plot they were going to have. So
Yep.
different this time.
All right. One last question because we're almost out of time. I think the audience and myself would like to know, what are you currently working on? What are you working on now? Julie.
Nothing.
Nothing.
I'm taking a little break. I think it's what I needed at the moment, but there's always ideas bouncing around in my head. I'm thinking, I could do this and I can do that, but I've yet to sit down with a piece of paper or the computer and do anything. But there will be some more.
Yeah. Well, you need that time to fill up the well.
Yes, absolutely.
Then you can pull from the well when it's full again. So yeah,
Yep.
it's part of the process, but it's a little unnerving sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good for you though. Just lean into it. Elena, how about you? What do you work?
Well, I'm just finishing up edits on my next book that comes out in May, Call to Pleaser. It's a erotic romance. And then I just started working on some zany sci-fi space opera thingy that I had some friends and myself brainstorm for about a week ago, and I decided to, you know what, I'm going to make this a book and I'm going to see how it goes.
Sounds fun. Sounds fun. Bailey, how about you?
I'm working on young adult, dark academic, sci-fi dystopia.
That's multiple genres in one book. Oh, that sounds great. And Jenna, how about you? What are you working on?
I'm also doing a bit of the filling up the well at the moment, but kind of looking at continuing on both series that I've got on the go, and also, sorry, my dog is bothering me at my leg now. He is getting aware that it is 1 a.m. But yeah, also trying to maybe write a horror movie to go and film with my friends in the woods, but also that's probably a bad idea, so we might not do it.
Film a horror movie in the woods.
Mhm.
All right. Well, so those of you who are listening, of course, these are just little teasers, and you can read the whole books by buying them. I hope that has given you some interest in supporting these authors. And thank you guys. You did a great job, and I really enjoyed listening to every one of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for
Catherine
having us.
moderating for us. She did a great job.
Thank you.